up on the top of her nest, and I'm hoping that we are going to get a glimpse of, well, I don't know if beautiful is the right word to describe the Hadeda chicks, but whatever they may be, whatever you think they may be, maybe they're so ugly that they are cute, but I'd love to see their little heads pop up. Now, I was so lucky this year with finding such a variety of different nests. I must tell you that when I was guiding normally, I often would search and search and search for nests, and I never quite came right. The only ones I seemed to be able to find were either Varro's eagle-owled nests on old hammerkorp nests, or I could find weaver nests pretty well, but that's it. So this year was quite interesting for me. It's just amazing the different areas, and I think I was just in the right spot at the right time. But here this female Hadeda Ibis sits, keeping her clutch of chicks nice and warm. Not that I think that she needs to keep them too warm on a day like today. It's quite pleasant at the moment. And perhaps the male is out searching, probing around, looking for a nice earthworm or a grub or a beetle of some sort to come back and feed these chicks. But we'll probably just spend a moment here and see if he does return. And maybe this is even him. It could be the other way around. They will take turns once these little ones have or seen as though they've hatched now. And you can see she's moving around a little bit. Or perhaps those little ones, or he is moving around a little bit. Perhaps those little ones are moving around inside the nest. Isn't this just incredible? I remember growing up as a kid, my best friend managed to have she found a Hadeda nest in a tall pine tree in her garden. And I'll never forget that one night we had a sleepover party, and her mom came in the morning, and she had one of these Hadeda chicks that had fallen out the nest. Now, unfortunately, the nest was so high at the top of this pine tree, it was impossible for us to climb up into it and go and put it back. Oh, there it looked like a little head popped up. Was that a head? See if that happens again. So if you just watch sort of between her breast and her beak, every now and then it looked like something was popping up. Maybe it was one of those little chicks. Anyway, so her mom brought in this little Hadeda chick, and they actually raised it. And they fed it sort of mealworms that you could get from the pet shop. And they ground them up and sort of syringed it into the little bird's mouth. And it lived. Can you believe it? Eventually it fledged and went off on its way. And that was my first experience, real experience with a Hadeda. But this is much better, to be able to sit here and watch them grow up. And I hope that they have a bit more luck than those magpie shrikes, that nest that we found on Hyena Road. I hope that they have a little bit more luck than they did. And we've got a couple of visitors here. Oh, there's a little head. You see it? There's a little head popping up. Good morning, little chick. You may also be able to hear the yellow-billed hornbill chatting around just behind me, but it's disappeared behind a tree now, but it's very noisy. Now, I'm not quite sure when these chicks were born, so perhaps you'll be able to help me, or not born, they were hatched. Maybe you can let me know by either hashtagging Safari Live. And remember, I'm also still waiting for answers to the quiz that I had earlier, so maybe you can do a combined post. We were wondering which raptor we saw, or the sort of silhouette of it. You could see a bit of color on it, and I think it was quite an easy one for this morning. But if you could hashtag Safari Live with your answers from the bird quiz and perhaps when these chicks were born. Oh, wonderful. And well done to James, who guessed it correctly this morning and said that it was very specific to a pale morph Wahlberg's eagle. You are indeed 157% correct. Well done to that. It was a fairly easy one, but for those of you who maybe just started watching the show, we love birding out here. All of us do. It's not always about the big animals, but we love the smaller things too, as we were just looking at the Hadeda. So remember to keep keep a bird list, and also note little key identifying features when looking at a bird. So I don't know if you notice, it's got a very fine beak, that Wahlberg's eagle that we were looking at, quite sharp and pointy, and quite a small bird, not very robust, quite slender compared to the rest of the birds. But as you start learning more and more about these African bird species, and you keep looking at the same birds over and over again, eventually it becomes so easy that you could probably identify them with your eyes closed. Probably not too true. Now we're sitting patiently. I'm really hoping that this little one, well, we're going to see all three little heads, if I'm not mistaken. That's what I counted in a screenshot that somebody took. Now, Diane, you were wondering, at what age will these chicks start to eat sort of solids, so in actual bugs and worms and things, rather than mom or dad regurgitating the insects up? That's a very, very good question that you've asked. Now, they probably start to fledge anywhere between about 30 and 40 days, somewhere around there. I would take it. That's sort of the average time for the larger birds. The smaller birds, like the magpie, shrikes and things, tend to be just less than 20 days. So I'd imagine somewhere around there after about a month, when they're able to move around a little bit more. And then once they fledge completely, they'll hang around with mom and dad as well and sort of forage together. Now, we don't see it too often out here, but back in the cities, you'll often see how gregarious Hadedas are. And something that we used to see, I lived on quite a big property growing up, like a small farm, basically. And we used to get masses coming through, especially after my dad had the sprinklers out on the lawn, because it would make the ground nice and soft. And I think the earthworms would come up to the surface, and well, the Hadedas would get straight in there. And often you'd see some younger ones learning how to use those long beaks. Now, we see it with the hornbills as well. Imagine having something so large on the front of your face. You've got to learn. Oh, there's another little chick popping up. You've got to learn how to probe that and where to probe it. And I'm sure that takes quite a bit of practice. So I think that they'll rely on the adults for pulling worms out, and then they will nibble them. And then once they sort of get the hang of their beaks, very much like an elephant uses its trunk and has to train its trunk, it'll just keep practicing until it eventually finds something. There was a pair of woodland kingfishers also fluttering around. You could hear them calling quite loudly. Now, looking at that magnificent beak that you can see on the Hadeda's faces, Angie was actually wondering, how long is it? Another fantastic question. Now, I'm not too sure. I haven't really read any measurements, but I reckon it's probably just shy of the length of a ruler. So probably somewhere about that long. Maybe it varies slightly with Hadeda to Hadeda. So I'm going to go in centimeters now, because I can't do the conversion to inches. My maths, that's not my strong point at school. I'll get there. So I reckon between, I'd probably say about 15 and 25 centimeters. Like I said, just sort of shy of your ruler. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like anybody's coming back to the nest just yet. Perhaps there's not many grubs or worms around today in the soil. Not every day can be too easy. But at least we got a quick little glimpse of the chicks, which was quite nice. So there we go, another one. That's what I was hoping for. So already a fantastic start, a beautiful sunrise. And now to watch the story unfold of the 3 Hadeda chicks. Now, looking at these beautiful birds and obviously chatting about their beautiful beaks, Carter has actually mentioned that these birds remind him quite a bit about